Morning, church family. Hope everyone have a blessed Sabbath. Let's sing Morning Has Broken.
Ready? No, ready? Yes. Let's go. Let's go, Uncle. Let's go.
Morning has
Broken like the first morning, blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the
Good morning and welcome to Lilydale Church, everybody, and a warm welcome to those watching online as well. Well, it looks like we've got a bit of a treat this morning with Michael preaching on creation and science, and I just wanted to take special note of the flowers up here. Camilla and Vashti put them together with their science theme, so kids, just keep an eye on the flowers and see if they have changed colour by the end of the service. See, the ones has started to change colour already. So we had a bit of a dramatic week this week, didn't we? I know in my house I had youth arrive back from Converge in the early hours of the morning on Tuesday, about 3:30 a.m. So I got up to welcome them back. And we lost power as well. How many of you lost power this week? Yeah, quite a few. Is there anybody who still doesn't have any power? No? I know Kate and Michael only just got it back last night and had a hot shower last night. So, yes, and I know I was a refugee this week. I came down to work at the church on Wednesday, and some kids and teachers had an unexpected day off school, which might have been a bit exciting. So I was very grateful for community this week, and we had some good neighbours who just told us to throw a power cord over the fence, and they hooked us up to their generator for a bit, which kept our fridge going, which was very nice. Recently we were challenged at work and asked, how are we being a good neighbour, and what difference are we making in our street and in the lives of our neighbours? It's a bit of a challenge for me personally because I kind of introvert at home. So, it's a good question. How can we be a good neighbour? Would you like to just join me in prayer? Dear God, we just thank you for your goodness. We thank you for our community around us. And I just pray that we can be a light shining out for those around us. I pray that we can be a good neighbour. And Lord, I pray that we just stay connected to you, who is our source of power, Lord, and things just don't work without you. So, Lord, we just pray that we will stay connected to you, that we will shine brightly for you. And God, I pray that you'll be with Michael as he takes a word for us this morning on creation and science. And I pray that we can all be touched and that we can just get a glimpse of you as our great creator. We thank you, God. I pray that your spirit will move strongly among us this morning. In your name, amen.
Good morning, everyone. Very good to see you all here today. I like the way Zanita said it, refugees. When we were here at church for our staff meeting, we saw a variety of different people here in the church because everyone had lost power. So no matter what week you've had, whether it has been a bit difficult, whether work has looked a little bit on and off as well, and whether you haven't known, whether things are going to come back online or not, we are very, very grateful to see you here today and very blessed to be joined on this beautiful Sabbath morning. Now, this last weekend, I missed out on being together with you because I was at Converge with about 25 or 30 to 30 of our youth. Now, our youth made, it would have been a third of the Victorians that went to Converge. So there were 80 Victorians in total, and about 800 were attending Converge. It was the biggest Converge ever, and many of us were really blessed by the speakers. And as Anita said, we had a lot of people coming home early. I know I took my car, came home at 2:30 a.m., but there were those who drove on the bus who came back at 4:30. Here in the church parking lot, they were back at 4:30. So please keep them in your prayers because I've been talking to them. We're all still recovering, but it was a very blessed weekend. And I think next week we will be able to tell you a little bit more about it. Last weekend, we also had the work in beer, and I want to give everyone a thanks to all those who joined out to help. I know there might not look like a big difference, especially with the storm that blew through, but there was a very big difference that was made, and we got everything out in time, ready for hard rubbish, so many thanks for that. Today we have, as we know, Michael Croft presenting about the science of creation. And I know you've had a lot to do with the Faith and Science Conference. And in my many conversations with people, talking to them about science and creation, a lot of them have referenced this Faith and Science Conference. And so we look forward to what you have to share. Kids and other children at heart, I don't know if you noticed, but our flowers today also have a bit of a science theme going behind it. Some of them have already started to change color, but just keep an eye on them. We're hoping that they continue to look beautiful and make a good change throughout this service. Adventurers and Pathfinders are back on today, and that is very exciting. Last night, we had our only Pathfinder registration night for the year, and it went off very, very well. And so today, we have our first Pathfinder Hall night, which is happening here at church at 4:30 p.m. So if you are a Pathfinder or a parent who has a Pathfinder, please make sure you are here at the church at 4:30 p.m. Ready to go. Adventurers are also on today. At 2 p.m., adventurers have their registration. So if you are a parent and you have an adventurer, 2 p.m. here in the church hall, there will be registration followed by the activities today. Also, for your note, church camp is coming up, and that is happening from the 8th to the 11th of March, which is a long weekend. There hasn't been much other than just a save the date that has been going out, but keep an eye out for more information. Information on registration will be coming out soon, and so we look forward to seeing you all there. Now, children's ministry. Children's ministry is an important ministry here in our church, and oftentimes we find that in ministry, sometimes we may lack the help, and children's ministry right now is in need of some volunteers to help out and lead out in these ministries. So, if you have a passion for kids, or if you're looking for somewhere to get involved in church, feel free to join our children's ministry. There is a lot of space, a lot of people looking for help, and we have a wonderful group of kids here at church. So, if you just want to get connected, or if you are a place where you are happy to serve, get in touch with any of us pastors, and we will be more than happy to connect you with our children's ministry. Now, I don't know if you've noticed, but in the foyer, we have some free books. Now, I don't know if you have perused through these books, but there is a lot to read, a lot to fill our bookshelves with. So if you see something you're interested, feel free to go out to give it a look. It is a very, very good thing that we as a church engage in literature. And so I hope there that you will find a book that you can engage in, take home, or maybe you'll find something that you can give to someone else. That is what we're here to do. And so I am going to ask, we have someone here from Avondale, and I'm going to invite Lyndon to come up and join me up the front. Now, we did have a video that we wanted to play up front, but as these things, sometimes these things go wrong. But yes, you have a little spiel and a little presentation to give us about Avondale, so I will give you the mic.
Wonderful. Yeah, look, my name's Lyndon Darko. There are some relatives around here that I know very little about. I might have seen them once or twice in my life, but the name Darko seems to be somewhere in the vicinity. Look, my job, 3 weeks into the new job, I'm the school relationship liaison officer, which means I go around to schools talking to children about their passion and their purpose. And I really value that opportunity. It's something I've been doing for 30 odd years in the classroom. But this year is a new door that opened up, and I have an opportunity to speak to kids and get them to explore what their passions are and how they can be used in God's purpose. So, who's been to Avondale? Yeah, quite a number. Who's going to Avondale? 1, 2, maybe. Look, my mum went to Avondale. I went to Avondale, and my daughter is at Avondale doing 4th year of her teaching degree. Avondale is generational, and we want to let you know that we certainly support that whole idea. There's been so many people go through Avondale and have been serving their communities ever since. And that's something that is still very dear to Avondale's ethos. It's certainly something that we are still very much interested in promoting. So it's never too late to do a Masters of Teaching. All right, so if you've thought about maybe, I don't enjoy my workplace so much anymore, and you decided that maybe I want to change, think about a Masters of Teaching degree. You're never too late. But look, thank you for the opportunity to be here. I'm going to do the kids' story a bit later. And have a happy Sabbath. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lyndon, for sharing. And thank you once again, all of you, for being here this morning. It's so good to see you. I went to Avondale and I can sort of back that experience. It's a very good experience. So if you know someone who is searching for what to do, or if you're coming upon that age where you're also figuring out what to study, consider Avondale. But once again, be very blessed. It is very good to join you this morning, and have a very, very happy Sabbath.
There's no sunshine outside today, but we're going to have sunshine in our soul because Jesus is our light.
It's time for the kids' story. So, kids, if you're in the house, come on down the front. I see I've got a front row already. Excellent. Ever hopeful that the PowerPoint might kick in at any time, but we'll go without. All right. Who's ever done something and you look back at it and go, man, that was a stupid thing to do? Yeah? We've all felt that way. We're going, oh, man, that worked out really badly. Shouldn't have done that. All right. There's these things that you probably haven't seen too much of. They're called a bar radiator heater. Your parents will probably know what they were, and they were a little radiator heater that you had, and they had a little bar in the middle of it with a metal guard in front of it, okay? And there was wire wrapped all the way around this thing, and you plug it in and turn it on, and it starts to glow nice and orange, and it starts to give off heat, right? So as a kid, I often wondered what the bar that had the metal wire around, I often thought to myself, I wonder what that feels like. And so when it wasn't glowing, you know, I had enough of that sense to kick in, no, don't touch it while it's hot. But I decided to touch it one day when I go in and I turn it on and I'm looking at it and going, oh, it's not hot yet. Maybe if I touch it, I'll be able to feel what it's like. Do you think that was a good idea? No? Why? It's on. Yes, there's electricity running through it. So I poked my finger in through the grill, you know, it's really telling you shouldn't stick your finger in there. I poke my finger in there and touch it. What do you think happened to my finger? Oh, well, that was a stupid thing to do, wasn't it? You know, sometimes we're a bit interested and a bit curious, and sometimes that gets us into a bit of trouble. They don't have them they do in some parks. You know, the park where you have a seesaw, right? Seesaws, I loved a seesaw when I was a kid. Who likes going on the seesaw? Yeah? All right, cool. Well, when I was young, we lived way out at a place called Narromine, and on Saturdays, church was a whole day event. Why? Because all the farmers would come in from outside, we'd spend all day at church, we'd go to the park for lunch, and then we'd have a meeting in the afternoon and usually go to someone's farm and have a bonfire at night, as you do on farms. Anyway, there were seesaws in the park, and one day my brother and I went to the seesaw, and he starts walking up the seesaw, right? Not sitting on it, he starts walking up the seesaw. And I go, this is a good idea, I'm going to walk up behind him. Do you think that's a good idea? So my brain kicks in and goes, oh no, this isn't a good idea. So what do? I turn around and I walk back down the seesaw. And I step off the seesaw and turn round. What do you think's happened by then? Yeah, the old law of physics kicks in, and I turn around just in time to get clopped in the chin by the seesaw now that my brother's on the other end of. So off I go to hospital with a couple of stitches. So, you know, probably shouldn't have done that. Bit of a stupid thing to do. When I was a teenager, I used to go camping with Pathfinders. Who goes camping, Pathfinders? Yeah, cool, all right. And so that was really good because Mum and Dad weren't there to tell me what to do. And so I was like, oh, cool, I can do what I like, right? We stopped in at somewhere to get some refreshments on the way back from camp with the Pathfinders. And I went in and I ordered a milkshake and some hot chips. Do you think that was a good combination? Back in those days, when you bought hot chips, they weren't like crispy chips, they were greasy chips, right? So I'm sitting in the back of this car, eating my chips and drinking my milkshake, and we're going through the Lilydale Mountains. Do you think that ended well? No. I'm going, pull over. Wasn't pretty. So that wasn't a really smart thing to do, was it? No. When I lived in New Zealand, there's the milkshake. Yeah. And I signal. Next one. Yeah. You saw me, that's not me in the boat. But when I lived in New Zealand, I went on this river rafting thing, right? Really cool experience. And I was in the back of the boat, just like the guy is right up the back there. And they're going, now when we go over the next rapids, it was like a really big drop. They said, right, you in the back, you two up the back, you've got to hang on really, really tight. You've got to make sure you keep your paddle with you, and you've got to hang on with both hands. Now, I'm a bit gummy, okay? I've got a small thumb. So when it came to holding on to things, I couldn't do both with one hand. And so I'm going, so what do I need to hang on to? Probably the oar in this hand and, this hand on the boat, right? And so I'm hanging on and we go over. Well, sort of again, it's the law of physics, right? You go over and the boat stretches, right? And so it acts like a bit of a push out the door. And so I go over and I go, whee, over the top of everyone into the water. Not so smart, was it? I'm really special. You know why? I'm very good at creating things. If I had the photo come up, it would be even better. But I create rocks. Okay, I am so good that I can create my own rocks, and I've created two types. Ones they find in your kidneys, and ones they find in your gallbladder. Matter of fact, when I had my gallstones removed, the surgeon told me, man, you are really, really good at making gallstones. And when I took all the stones out, you had 50 gallstones. That's the largest number of gallstones I've ever pulled out of someone. So, you may go, well, how is that a silly thing? Well, it's not a silly thing because, well, it is a silly thing. Yeah. The reason why you get kidney stones and gallstones is because of what you're not drinking. So guess what? I have to drink lots of water these days. And I have to steer clear of all those, the gallbladder was taken out, so I can still eat some of that stuff that you shouldn't, but you really shouldn't anyway. But, I was a bit of a slow learner when it came to doing that kind of stuff. I don't know, who loves surfing? Who likes going in the waves and the water? Yeah? I was a beach boy, kind of, not the band, but, I used to love going to the beach and getting in the surf and doing body surfing. A few years ago, I went to the beach at Stewart's Point, which was the big camp for New South Wales, and I got out in the surf and I'm going, yeah, some really big waves were coming through. And, yeah, that's me. No, the one on the right is me, okay? I got a big wave, and the idea is that you've got to get out in front of the wave instead of getting caught by the wave. And as you get older, guess what? You're not so fast anymore. You lose a bit of your speed. And so what happened was that I got caught by the wave and dumped by it, and in I went, and I hit my forehead, and this arm went back, and I came up, and I was in a lot of pain and a lot of trouble. I spent a couple of weeks in hospital. Fortunately, I didn't have any long-term injuries that I know about. And so I survived reasonably well. I got airlifted not airlifted off the hospital, but Grafton, down to John Hunter. Great helicopter ride. My wife went for her first helicopter ride. She was really excited. Not. And so, she's going, I wish my first helicopter ride would have been one where, we were doing something scenic, but I had to sit there and watch you. And it's like, for those in the science profession, ketamine was my friend. That's one of those wonderful things they do when you're in a lot of pain. All right. Maybe one more. Can we go forward? I was lucky when I was a kid. Why? Because who's the youngest in the family? Yeah, youngest in the... It's really cool being the youngest in the family. You know why? You can watch your older brothers and sisters do stupid things and you go, do I need to do that? Do I need to... No, maybe I don't. You see them get into trouble and you go, maybe I won't do that. Or maybe you're the person who's got them into trouble. Maybe. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child and think like a child. But now that I've become a man, I've put an end to childish things. You want to know a secret? Just because you get older doesn't mean, you don't make silly mistakes and you don't do stupid things. Next one, please. Yeah. Sometimes the most important lessons are those we end up having to learn the hard way. Is that true? I think your parents would agree that's true. Sometimes the lessons that we need to learn are the ones that certainly cause us the most grief. And my last slide. Hey. Fortunately, what does it say up there? Yeah. Guess who we can get a lot of wisdom from? Certainly the people around you, your mum and dad, and even some older siblings might give you some good advice at times. Does that mean we're going to stop doing stupid things? Probably not. But God gives us lots of good wisdom in how to live and what we have to look forward to. So don't worry if you make mistakes, because that happens, because we do things sometimes that we look back on and go, should have done that differently. But this morning we can thank God that He is a great source of wisdom for us. If only we read, what's in the Bible, if only we talk to our parents, if only we talk to pastors and youth pastors and all those kind of people, they'll help us make some wise choices as we get older. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Sabbath.
Thank you, Lyndon. Thank you, Lyndon. Right, do we have a mic on here? Thank you, Lyndon. You certainly triggered a few of my stupid things I've done over the years. Thank you for that. Looks like we might have words up if we sing again. If we don't, please go to your smartphones. Those that have them, the next song is number 15, and you can watch on your smartphones. It's really hard to sing without words. And the very last one is 487. So if you can go there, please do that. It's time for the offering, and I don't need to say much. Expenses go up and up every day. Just go shopping or ask your wife if you're a male. And we have our expenses here at church too. So please give generously today. Let's bow our heads and pray before the deacons come up. Thank you, Father, for the money you're giving us today. Please use it for the best use that we need here at church, for your honor and your glory. Amen. Thank you, deacons.
15, My Maker and My King.
Thank you. Good morning. Long, long ago, there was a great flood. It originated from the fact that some children who found the winking owl in a tree plucked out all its feathers. They forced a grass reed through its nose and treated the bird most shamefully. This is how the flood story of the Bundaba Aboriginal people begins. What you need to know about this story is that it predates us. It's from the original inhabitants of the Gold Coasts. This story was told long before European settlers arrived, before the missionaries, before railroads, cities, before a knowledge of the Bible. And yet you'll find this Aboriginal flood story has elements most familiar to the biblical narrative. Let me just start the story again. So long, long ago, there was a great flood. It originated from the fact that some of the children who found the winking owl in a tree plucked out all its feathers. They forced that grass reed through its nose and treated the bird most shamefully. The bird flew without wings into the heavens and showed himself to Ngawawanga. That's the great father. Ngawawanga became very angry and he decided to drown the people. Later, the people saw a small cloud in the distance rising, which grew bigger and bigger till it filled the whole sky. The thunder began to roll and crash, and the people were greatly afraid. With the rain and thunder was a terrible wind, even worse than we had this week in Victoria. And it broke limbs off trees and it rooted up others. During this terrible storm, there was a noise above the awful crashes of thunder. The noise was coming from the north. The salt water, the sea, came pouring over the ranges from the north. The flood rose higher and higher until the land was all covered except the tops of just 2 or 3 mountains. From further west, a man and his wives with a dog were battling their way in a canoe when a bird with a leaf in its mouth flew in front of them, showing them the way to Mount Broome. They eventually reached Mount Broome and landed, and there were some other survivors there too. Then Jab Balgari, the great left-handed man, incised his little finger and let the blood trickle down into the floodwaters. The waters began to go down and eventually disappeared off the country. All other people were drowned. It's the Aboriginal flood story. Now, the story of the great flood recorded in Genesis is really familiar to us. We've got the building of the ark, the animals entering. Some Christians, of course, have wondered, did that story actually happen? Well, I met Dr. Stacey Hatfield. She's a cultural anthropologist from Andrews University, and she shared with me that there are more than 200 flood stories known around the globe, on every continent, well, except Antarctica, across diverse cultural groups, some well-known, some obscure places, and a number in Aboriginal oral history here in Australia as well. Did you notice some of the familiar elements in the Aboriginal story to the Genesis story? For example, in both stories, the flood was sent because people were wicked. They're treating each other or animals shamefully. The people drowned. All the land was covered. There was a man and a woman in a boat. There were animals. And the bird with a leaf in its beak. That was in common to both stories as well, as a sign of dry land. They both landed on a mountain, and there was a blood sacrifice at the end of the flood in both stories. So Dr. John Morris examined around these 200 flood stories, and he found that 95% of the flood stories referenced the global flood, in which a favoured family was mentioned 88% of the time, who in 70% of the stories survived by way of a boat. In 66% of the stories, the flood was a result of human wickedness. 67% of the narratives, animals were saved, and animals played a part in the majority of the stories. Features do vary, though, in these oral histories from other cultures. Rainbows are rarely mentioned, only 7% of the time, and 8, being the number of persons saved, is mentioned 13% of the time. But I believe these shared elements of the world's flood stories show that there are traces of Noah's flood left not only in our collective memories, but in the earth around us. Evidence that can shed light on the real story, a story that can profoundly impact our understanding of who we are and where we came from and how God moves and works in our world. Please have a look at this Chinese character for boat. Now, making up this pictogram, you'll see 3 symbols. There's the symbol for vessel, that makes sense, but there's also the symbol for 8. And the symbol for mouth or people, as in 8 mouths to feed. I wonder, does this word for boat reflect Noah's flood story? Now, the Chinese have one of the most ancient cultures, most ancient languages on the planet. Now, the language continues to evolve. It is not what it was, but this language was around since before the pyramids were built, before the Bible was written. These Chinese characters existed. Some researchers are thinking that the first great Chinese emperor that unified the country, Huangdi, and his people actually followed God. And in the very symbols developed for Chinese writing, there might just be a memory of the stories of Genesis, from the creation up to Babel. From the creation story to the Babel dispersion. See what you think. This is the Chinese pictogram for to covet or desire. And it appears to have the elements of 2 trees and women. Are these the 2 trees in the Garden of Eden? The word to create has the elements of speak, dust or mud, life and walk. That sounds so much like the creation of man from the dust of the earth, do you think? Now, so far, this might be a coincidence, but there are hundreds of such examples. You can get entire books on this topic. I can share sermons with you just done on Chinese pictograms. And the links are even clearer if you go back to the ancient language before some of the earlier forms of writing, because languages change much over the years. This is the pictogram for complete and finish, and it's got 2 persons first home sort of as an element in there. I wonder if that's referencing Adam and Eve. Tempter. Oh, no, we've got forbidden and to warn. Here we've got 2 trees and God. I wonder if that's the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Here we've got tempter. So here we've got the elements of secret and man and garden and devil, trees and cover. Sounds like a story you might be familiar with. Now, I verified these symbols with our Chinese teacher up at school, a Mandarin native speaker, and she gave me another to add to this sermon, and it's the word for righteousness. Have a look at this one. So in her own handwriting, she's given us this symbol, and you see the elements of hand and spear or lance in the word righteousness. And that denotes me, which when combined with sheep represents righteousness. It just reminds me of what Jesus did for us on the cross, how his hands were nailed to the cross, how the spear went through his side. I think a lot of elements of the gospel and our early history as the human race might just be hidden in Chinese characters. So I was thinking, how is it that humanity could so quickly forget the creation stories, the flood stories, if it wasn't that long ago? But I think there just might be a collective memory in cultures around the globe of some of these stories. I'd like to share you with a story of a very prominent scientist, a very notable Dr. Mary Schweitzer. She's an American paleontologist, and she's just upended recently our understanding of dinosaur fossils. She's just stunned the scientific community. She's actually shown us we don't know how dinosaur fossils formed, really. Nobody, you see, had thought to dissect dinosaur bones or soak them in acid. I mean, why would you? They cost a fortune. But this is what she did. She dissected the bones, she soaked them in acid, and inside she discovered soft tissue inside the bones of the dinosaur. Now, these bones are thought to be 68 million years old, and yet she found structures inside that looked like blood vessels and blood cells. No one had thought to look for anything like this in dinosaur bones because you're not going to find proteins after millions of years preserved in fossils, so everyone said. Now, she had to work very hard to convince the scientific community, but she has managed to do that. She has confirmed that soft tissue was present. She's proved even that the bone belonged to, get this, a pregnant Tyrannosaurus rex female. She can tell all of that. She's worked hard. She's verified her results. She's convinced the scientific community. But in science, it's a mystery on how soft tissue could be preserved for so many millions of years. Science doesn't know how that's possible. Now, of course, this news was welcomed by scientists who believe in a recent creation. Science may not know how proteins could be preserved in these dinosaur bones, but if the dinosaur tissue remains were not that old, that could well be a good explanation. If they were buried in Noah's flood, this could well make sense. I want to tell you now about another prominent Australian scientist, this time, called Dr. Ron Neller. He's a world expert in fluvial geomorphology. What's that? Glad you asked. He studies the surface of the earth. He's travelled the world. He's seen incredible things all around the world. He's looked at river systems and landscapes. He's fallen into raging rivers, been knocked unconscious, dragged out, nearly dead, survived, been bitten by poisonous things and more. Very exciting life. And in all of this, he's studied environments from around the world, from the Arctic to the tropical, the subtropical to desert ecosystems, all of this sort of thing. He's held positions here in Australian universities and internationally. He's worked with big teams like research institutes with over 40 people. He's got top publications, of course. He's been an advisor to governments around the place. Now, Ron was not a Christian, not at first. And as he studied the world around him, science led him to change his mind. Ron said this: "I was once researching in the Amazon jungle, and my colleagues were back home theorizing about how climate change formed the landscape over millions of years. But when I looked at the evidence, I didn't see that. What we saw were very mobile river systems rapidly changing their courses and creating new landscapes that do not need eons of time. Why do we say it took many years? But of course, I was told in no uncertain terms by some colleagues to think more logically." Later, his team was analysing sediments off the coast of Hong Kong. He says this: "After we had analysed the sediments in the laboratories, I looked at the data and I said to university colleagues, I see evidence in these ocean sediments for one flood, one enormous flood. Of course, I was told again to be more logical, otherwise I could lose my research grants." Now, Dr. Ron saw that sedimentary rocks cover over 70% of the planet, and most of these rocks are made by fast-flowing water. He saw that 40% of the planet's surface are essentially sedimentary plateaus, which are elevated flat areas. 60% of Africa is a plateau. Ron asked himself, how do you find plateaus with relatively uniform surfaces or just slightly undulating surfaces that are meant to be hundreds of millions of years old? You see, he thought surely they should be torn apart by erosion after millions of years. But they're only slightly eroded, nowhere to the extent that science expects if they're ancient. Ron also noted that some of these plateaus are up to 12 kilometres thick with sediment, and the global average is 2 kilometres. 2 kilometres of sediment, that is a lot of sediment left. What river could form 2 kilometres or 12 kilometres of sediment today? Where do you find more than just a few centimetres forming anywhere on the globe? Well, you don't. At today's rate of sedimentation, which is really slow, you don't even get enough sediment to form fossils, to bury the creatures that are dying. More amazingly to Dr. Ron is he noticed that between the layers of sediment, there was a lack of bioturbation. You know all about that, you know. If I have a bit of mud falling, you know, a bit of a muddy layer forming today, within hours you'll find animal tracks or burrows, roots growing, some disturbance like that. Just within hours, there'll be worms digging, crabs burrowing, animals walking through the mud. You'll see all these sorts of things on a freshly laid sediment. But what scientists know is that in the sedimentary record, from one layer to the next, it's a smooth top to the layer. There's no bioturbation. There's none of this digging and burrowing and animal tracks between from one layer to the next. It's as though all the layers formed in a hurry at once. But if, as science thinks, these layers were formed by many thousands of floods over eons, we should see the layers stirred and blurred. There should be lots of this bioturbation. Dr. Ron was also impressed by underfit rivers. That's a river that is not large enough to create the valley in which it sits, like this one here. Underfit rivers are all over the place, especially in central Australia or along the east coast of Australia. 50% of France's rivers are underfit rivers. How did all these underfit rivers carve their valleys? Some thought it was glaciers, but glaciers weren't in most of these places. One explanation could be that a continent draining giant flood event could carve valleys in which most of these underfit rivers exist. Water gaps exist all around the world too. This is where a trickle of water or a river carves a channel right through a mountain range. In central Australia, there are hundreds of examples where a small channel cuts through an entire mountain range. Ron wondered, when looking at the small water flow, like what we see here, how could that cut through a massive mountain? How's this possible? A small water flow can't cut through gorges and mountain ranges. There should be a lot more water. So this is the sort of scientific data that was coming across Ron's desk daily, and he started to question his beliefs. Of course, he was warned by the scientific community, don't question the scientific models. But he saw feature after feature that looked like it formed a giant catastrophe. And from his extensive travels around the world, he actually came to the conclusion that, hey, there must have been a giant flood. Now, you need to know, he was not a Christian at this stage, but he started to believe in the Bible as a real document of history. The words of Genesis, he said, I see evidence for that. He started to say around his university that he believed that God existed. Then he was unfortunately on the end of some, we'll say, interesting reactions. He resisted becoming a Christian, and he didn't want to harm his amazing career. Soon, an atheist colleague challenged him. She was concerned about his belief in God. She wanted to prove to him that God didn't exist. And Dr. Ron was the only God-believing a lecturer in his whole department. His colleague demanded, let's go to church together this weekend. I'm going to prove to you that God doesn't exist. So that weekend, they both went to their local church to prove that God didn't exist. And that day, they both gave their life to Christ. The atheist woman and the agnostic Ron. Here's Ron and Julie. They both became Christians. Dr. Ron Neller first looked at the evidence on the surface of the earth. Next, he concluded that the Bible's history was true, and then became a Christian. I wonder what he did next. He married Julie. Let me share with you about the Paleo Group. This is a recent international team of scientists from around the world, and they're testing dinosaur bones for radioactive carbon. Now you're saying, that's a bit unusual. Yeah, you're right. Why would you test dinosaur bones for radioactive carbon? Radiocarbon doesn't last very long. It shouldn't be found in dinosaur bones. If the dinosaurs, like this one here, we think has been extinct for more than 65 million years in science, if that's true, there shouldn't be any radioactive carbon remaining in those bones. Now let's explain what's going on here. All living organisms contain carbon atoms. And in your body, you've got different types of carbon atoms. Most of them have a mass of 12. You've got the occasional atom, though, inside of you that has a mass of 14. And these atoms are radioactive. Now, don't be worried about that. And over time, these carbon-14 atoms decay. That means they change into another type of atom. Now, whenever you're alive and consuming food, you're taking in small amounts of radioactive carbon. Once you stop eating and are no longer alive, the amount of carbon-14 in your remains naturally slowly decreases until there's none left. So we can look at the amount of carbon-14 left in our remains, and we can use that to estimate the age since the death of that organism. Now, if you've got a modern accelerator mass spectrometry machine, anyone with one of those? You'll be able to measure the amount of carbon-14 in the remains up to probably about 60,000 years ago. Older than that, it gets a bit hard. And certainly if the remains are older than, say, 250,000 years, there should be no carbon-14 left at all. Nothing detectable. And if a dinosaur has been extinct for 65 million years, you can see that it shouldn't have any radioactive carbon left at all. Except the Paleo Group did find carbon-14 when they dated 10 Cretaceous-Jurassic dinosaur bones from around the world. They shouldn't have had any carbon-14, but they did. These results are surprising, of course. The data translated to apparent ages of around 22,000 years for a dinosaur from the Gobi Desert to 39,000 years for a Triceratops from Montana. Similar ages were obtained for the other dinosaurs they tested from around the world. So if accurate, this data is completely incompatible with the standard geologic timescale. The dinosaur species named above have thought to be extinct for more than 65 million years. But I think the Paleo Group is showing us that maybe the dinosaur bones just aren't that old. Now, you might say 20 to 40,000 years. That's still not a short age creationist sort of date for a flood. But you need to remember this calculation is based on a modern composition of the atmosphere. If the atmosphere in the past was different, that changes the calculation. So, for example, if all the fossil fuels in the ground were back in the atmosphere, that would change the calculation. Or if the magnetic field was stronger in the past, which we think it was, that would change the calculation. It would actually reduce the age of the dinosaur bones actually to just mere thousands of years. And this wasn't an isolated group that found data like this. The RATE group, which is a collection of scientists who take Genesis seriously, did some similar carbon-14 dating. They tested coal samples, amongst other things, using the world's best AMS laboratories, and they found that each sample of coal contained enough carbon-14 to date the samples, and the samples were only thousands of years old, not millions of years old. If the coal was millions of years old, it shouldn't have any carbon-14, but each of these samples had at least 10 times more carbon-14 than needed to be detected in their laboratory. Here's a graph. Don't expect you to, completely follow it, but it's got different ages, supposed ages are down the bottom: Eocene, Cretaceous, Pennsylvanian ages. But it doesn't matter what science thought the age of the coal was. When they dated it, they all got similar sort of ages. That's what you're seeing there. All the coal samples, according to them, were dated to be only thousands of years old. Didn't matter where it came from, how the scientists thought it was, it dated a similar radiocarbon age. They dated other things too, like coal, so we said that, they dated natural gas, they dated diamonds, and lots of other things too. Dr. Ron Neller, our previous flood-chasing scientist, he was a research director when a team obtained 6 radiocarbon dates for Fraser Island, and his team rejected 4 of them as being contaminated. Ron, however, argues that they were rejected because the dates were too young. They indicated Fraser Island was only thousands of years old. Well, history would suggest that the theory of evolution will be always with us. This data probably won't make any difference to that. I mean, more than 2,500 years ago, the ancient Greeks taught that the world emerged on its own over long periods of time, just like today's theory of evolution. The ancient Romans, over 2,000 years ago, wrote about living things emerging from atoms colliding, leading to early simple plants and animals, and then more complex animals, and finally to the development of a series of progressively less brutish humans. It's not different to today's theory of evolution. Nonetheless, there are recent science discoveries that are giving a lot of people a lot of hope and reasons to be confident in Genesis and to be confident in the history of the Bible. I just want to finish now with 7 rapid-fire facts that are actually scientific mysteries to conventional scientists. But these are 7 facts that might be more easily understood if you know Genesis. The first scientific mystery, which you'll find in biology textbooks all over the place, is the Cambrian explosion. Now, what's the Cambrian explosion? It's the sudden appearance of life in the Cambrian rock layer. So you'll see on the diagram there, right, the second one from the bottom, the Cambrian rock layer. In that Cambrian rock layer, it's the first rock layer where you find all of these complex forms of life. In the rock layer immediately below that, the Precambrian rock layer, you find no complex forms of life. And then in the very next rock layer, all of these complex forms of life. It's as though they appeared suddenly out of nowhere all at once. This is a mystery that science struggles to understand. Where did all these complex life forms suddenly appear from? But could this be the record of the start of the catastrophe in Noah's day? Another very interesting feature of rock layers are polystrate fossils. You'll see a couple of examples here. Here we see a fossil, a tree trunk, that reaches right through several layers of rock that are dated millions of years apart. Now, these polystrate fossils are common, especially in coal, but it's a mystery as how a tree trunk could survive as layers form around it that took millions of years to form. Obviously, a tree trunk can't survive millions of years waiting for the next layer to form. A report in the Scientific American talks about our next mystery. They complained in the Scientific American that the evidence tells a contradictory story. That was their complaint. They say this because when we look at fossil beds, the fossil deposits are all mixed up. In the one fossil bed, you'll find marine creatures like saltwater creatures mixed with freshwater creatures like amphibians mixed with land creatures, things like millipedes, scorpions, insects, reptiles, all mixed together. I mean, they live in different places. How do they all get mixed together all over the world in fossil beds? The sort of mixing that you might expect from a global flood, though, would make it easier to understand. Another mystery is how the universe came into being. Science teaches about the Big Bang. Before the universe existed, there was absolutely nothing. So nothing becomes something somehow. How this happened is a mystery to science, of course. Think about this. There's no evidence that there ever was a time where there was nothing. There's no evidence for that. And then when we look at the universe, everything is amazingly fine-tuned for life. If some of the fundamental constants that describe the universe, if one of these fundamental constants was changed by even 0.001%, then even atoms themselves couldn't hold together. You wouldn't have a universe. The fine-tuning of life, the fine-tuning of the universe for life is another scientific mystery. The new James Webb Telescope, you may have heard about that in the news, is also presenting some mysteries and confounding Big Bang cosmologists. Astronomers said this: Webb will be a powerful time machine with infrared vision that will peer back over 13.5 billion years ago. That's how far away in the distance it's able to see light. To see the first stars and galaxies forming out of the darkness of the early universe. So I've got some of these pictures here. You're looking at some of the furthest images ever captured by humans. In the box there, I think it's one of the furthest away galaxies we have ever seen. But notice the picture is not remarkable. And that's remarkable because it's not remarkable. Because that is not a first-generation star, one of these primordial galaxies just forming out of the darkness of the early universe. It looks fully formed and normal and just like what you see everywhere else, doesn't it? That's what they're discovering. These hypothetical galaxies, the early universe, they're not seeing that. Instead, they're mature and fully formed, just like everything else in the universe. I think we're going to find a lot more interesting things with this James Webb Telescope. Our final mystery for today is the formation of irreducibly complex systems. This is an irreducibly complex object is one object that will not work if you remove a single part. Think of maybe like a mousetrap. Take away one part, it's broken. In your body, you've got a lot of irreducibly complex systems. If you take away one part, it doesn't work. And this presents a challenge for science because how could it evolve step by step, single mutation at a time? And how could organisms survive without that feature while it's waiting for it to evolve? Here's one example. This is a simplified diagram of blood clotting. It's an example of an irreducibly complex system. To clot your blood, you need a whole cascade of reactions, which are mentioned on this diagram. You need several proteins at each step, and you need each step, otherwise your blood won't clot. Now, I don't understand that diagram, but you need the lot of it. Otherwise, you're dead, right? And if you don't have the lot of it, how can you be alive and wait for the parts to evolve? You need every part. So that's an irreducibly complex system. I could talk about that alone for a whole sermon, irreducibly complex systems. There's books written on it. Anyway, let's wrap it up. In conclusion, I see a harmony between Genesis and science. Combining scientific exploration with the Genesis story reveals a compelling narrative that goes surely beyond mere coincidence. Whether I fully understand the science, I'm sure I don't, or interpret the Bible correctly, I'm sure I don't always get it right, I am confident that the God of Genesis is right here, right now, present among us. With unshakable conviction, I can declare this: God exists. The creator of the cosmos, the architect of existence, he stands revealed in the brilliance of Genesis. God's not merely a distant force out there, he's a personal creator. His attributes extend beyond imagination. He's magnificent, he's compassionate, he's life-infusing, he's deeply invested in your life and my existence. Let's firmly grasp the certainty that the God of Genesis is present among us. Let me just finish with two quick Bible verses for the scientist in you. Psalms 139 says, "Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it." Do you agree? And Psalm 111, "How amazing are the deeds of the Lord. All who delight in him should ponder them." I agree. So thank you for listening to a lot of science. We're still going to go to the prayer. I think we're going to skip the final song and pray. So, final benediction. Let's pray. Dear Lord, I want to thank you for creating us and redeeming us. Your creation is amazing. How more amazing must you be? Please give us insight into the book of Genesis as we take its words seriously over the coming weeks. Amen.